the air with the app everyone loves or loves to hate, front and center on the Hill, with some snippy moments, some surprising moments, and plenty of headlines as lawmakers consider banning TikTok because of its ties to China. Tonight, whether or not happy with what the CEO had to say and how this fight fits into the bigger power struggle between Washington and Beijing. Plus, a police officer in Virginia set to be fired after killing an unarmed black man. The video we're just getting from that shooting and what we're hearing from the victim's mother, emotional and angry. And the new and bizarre details about a dentist charged with killing his wife by poisoning her protein shake. A live report on that with the police affidavit just out, coming up. Plus, is it dangerous to taste the rainbow? A couple of lawmakers in California think so, out with a new plan to ban Skittles. So what's really their end game? And what's up with chemicals in candy? And might a chatbot write the next Oscar-winning screenplay? How a top union in Hollywood is trying to get out ahead of the AI revolution. And even though his bracket got busted big time, our Steve Kornacki is somehow still super excited for the Sweet 16. He's breaking down what you should know before this weekend's games later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and listen, it's not like TikTok's CEO was going to have it easy today, facing down lawmakers who think his app's bad news. But tonight, TikTok is definitely on defense after a hugely high-profile hearing that got spicy, and the TikTok's spokesperson says was dominated by political grandstanding. The big issue during this hearing, TikTok's ties to China. Watch.
Do any ByteDance employees in China, including engineers, currently have access to U.S. data?
This is a complex topic. Today, all data is stored by default.
No, it's not that complex. Yes or no, do they have access to user data?
After Project Texas is done, the answer is no. I don't think ownership is the issue here. With a lot of respect, American social companies don't have a good track record with data privacy and user security.
TikTok is a weapon by the Chinese Communist Party to spy on you, manipulate what you see, and exploit for future generations.
That's a taste of what it was like. So let's look at this in buckets. The three big things Congress was focusing on here. First, national security and data privacy. The U.S. is worried that the Chinese could use TikTok to basically spy on U.S. users because it's owned by ByteDance, a Chinese company. Second, you've got the content itself. Lawmakers think that could be dangerous and misleading on things like healthcare or mental illness. And that leads into our third bucket here, the focus specifically on how this app affects kids and how addictive it can be. Lawmakers bringing up some of the challenges. You know, those TikTok challenges that have gone viral and in one case led to the death of a 10-year-old. A lot of reasons why this is so high stakes. The U.S. is proposing multiple laws to ban the app that would give the Biden administration the power to do that, even as TikTok tries to make the case it's too big to ban, with 150 million Americans using it. Ideally, now, the Biden administration wants ByteDance to sell off TikTok. But China's being clear as recently as today that a forced sale is a non-starter, saying that would seriously hurt investors from multiple countries. Let me bring in Ryan Nobles, because this was everything kind of coming to a head here, Ryan, as it relates to this very popular app, especially among Gen Z, younger millennials, versus Congress and these national security concerns that we have. We heard the CEO of TikTok, even in what we just played, acknowledge that once what they call Project Texas, this big move to put U.S. user data in a U.S.-based cloud, is done, that China would not have access to U.S. user data. But until that is done, in some ways, it seems like the suggestion was that's still an open question.
Yeah, and then what happens to all that data in the interim, right, Hallie? He had no real clear answers for that. And to be clear, this is not necessarily the forum to have a complex conversation about something as complicated as a social media app that more than 150 million Americans use on a daily basis. But to say that the CEO of TikTok had any success at all in rolling back the kind of ball that continues to gain steam that's rolling down the hill in Capitol Hill, as it, in terms of the legislation designed to limit the access his app has in this country, there's no doubt he was unable to slow that down. I mean, there's already 3 pieces of legislation that lawmakers are talking about right now. They all, on various levels, rein in what TikTok is able to do in this country. Some of them even go as far as banning it outright. He had a very difficult day here on Capitol Hill, Hallie, and did not do enough to try and convince lawmakers that they should change course.
You know, I say this, Ryan, because you say, okay, this was not the forum to have this, like, in-depth, deep discussion about TikTok. An outsider, like an alien landing on Earth, might think, well, where else would we have these deep and in-depth discussions, if not in, like, the nation's capital, right? Shouldn't that be the forum? But what this sometimes turns into, and you got some of the flavor of it, is lawmakers, frankly, trying to make the points that they want to make. The head of TickTock trying to make the points that he feels like he needs to make in front of this committee, and all of it, right, under the shadow of this broader geopolitical fight between the U.S. and China. In some ways, this is not to diminish the TickTock issue that lawmakers have, but in some ways, this is part of a proxy fight.
Yeah, and to be clear, TickTok's CEO was certainly evasive to a number of the questions that these lawmakers have. But to your point, this issue is so complicated, and in many respects, they wanted yes or no answers to questions that just do not have yes or no answers. So, for instance, what are you going to do with the data? Tell us you're not going to sell it to anyone, yes or no? Well, which data are you talking about? You know, one of the points the TickTok CEO made is that so much of their data is just publicly available, that users voluntarily put it out there for the world to have. So it's difficult to say that that data is not going to be accessible to a wide range of people. Regardless, there were very specific questions about security, about content, about what they are doing with the data they are collecting, and the role that the Chinese government, in particular the Chinese Communist Party, has as it relates to TickTok, that he simply just could not answer. And that is a big problem for this company if they hope to rein in the goals that Congress has as it relates to this app.
It does have its defenders. TickTok was making the case, and has been now for days, that in some ways it is too big to ban, that it is in the phones and ingrained in the sort of lives and social lives of a lot of people in this country, 150 million of them, in fact. It does have its defenders.
That's right, Hallie. And the big question is, how do you unring that bell? 150 million people are on this app every day. They love it. A lot of people make a living off of it, and a group of them came together and put out a statement pleading with Congress not to go too far with this, saying infringing on Americans' First Right amendments and setting a potent and worrying precedent in a time of increased censorship of Internet users around the world is something that they're not in favor of. So this is not going to be an easy process for Congress. Even though it's easy to just say we should ban TickTok and get it over with, it's not going to be that easy, and they've got a lot of work to do here to figure out a solution to this problem.
So real quick, Ron, what is next, right? At this point, does this just go back to where the ball's in the lawmakers' courts and TickTok goes and does what it has to do?
Hallie, the big thing here is that there is not a bill that everyone agrees on, and neither Kevin McCarthy or Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, have said that they will definitely bring one of these bills to the floor. Lawmakers here have got to come up with a plan that they think is the best way to fix this problem. There's kind of bipartisan agreement that there's an issue that needs to be fixed here. What that policy prescription is, that we don't have an answer to yet.
Ryan and Bert, thank you both very much. Appreciate that. So listen, we are getting some late word tonight. The first look at body cam footage in the shooting of an unarmed black man just outside D.C. last month, as the police chief in that Northern Virginia county tonight says he plans to fire the officer who killed him. Now listen, the video is pretty grainy. It's not clear who is speaking in it, but we have to warn you, it's hard to watch.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Stop reaching! Stop reaching! Shots fired!
We don't know what exactly happened before the video started recording, but here's what we do know about the case and the victim. His name is Timothy Johnson. He was 37 years old. Police chased him because they thought he stole sunglasses from a mall. That one officer we mentioned is going to be fired. The other's on what they call modified restricted duty. And the Fairfax County chief says they're still looking for answers.
More often than not, the police body camera footage speaks for itself. This time, it does not.
I want to bring in Michelle Sandor, who's covering this for us. She is joining us now. Again, this is happening in Northern Virginia, just not too far from where we're sitting here in Washington, D.C. What else do we know about the sort of details, the facts of this case, the officer's status, et cetera? What did we learn from this news conference tonight?
Well, what's key is that this video is dark and it's hard to see what's going on. But we do know that Timothy Johnson is seen here in this video. It seems like he's allegedly shoplifting these sunglasses. And you see police start chasing him once he's outside of the mall. Then you see this sort of hectic scene where they're sort of screaming and looking for something. It's in some ways really hard to watch, as you said. What we know now from this press conference is that one police officer, as you said, has been fired. Another one is on restricted duty. This investigation is ongoing. The Commonwealth Attorney, which is really sort of the DA here, the person who's going to make the charging decision, he says that he's likely going to make a decision very soon here, but he said it's devastating that another black man here was shot by police. So that was pretty key that he said that today.
Yeah, devastating to not just the community, but to this family, obviously, who's lost somebody that they love. And the family's attorney is very clearly sort of speaking for them when he says this was, in his words, an execution.
I mean, the strong word, execution. Yeah. That's what his family is saying. They say even if he allegedly was shoplifting, it's not, you don't get a death sentence for that. Take a listen to more of what they've said.
Timothy had no gun. He didn't have anything that appeared as a gun.
No parent should not have to view the killing of their child.
It's so hard to watch his mother say, how can I watch the death of my child and then be asked to speak before people? That, she said, is my reality, though. And the attorney said justice delayed is justice denied. He said that no officer should be free at this point. So they are pushing for charges in this case. We'll have to see what happens here. But it is an interesting case to watch and a heartbreaking case again.
Do you have a timeline, Yamiche, on any charges, and if those were to come down, when those would happen, or is that still TBD?
So right now it's still TBD, but you can imagine that they understand that there are a lot of eyes on this case now that this video is out there. So the Commonwealth Attorney also, again, basically the district attorney is saying, I'm going to try as soon as possible to make this happen in terms of making a decision on what comes next.
Yamiche Sandor, thank you for being on top of this for us. Appreciate it. Stick out west, where a rally is just getting started in Los Angeles as we speak, as students get ready to head back to school tomorrow after 3 days out of class because of a strike that shut down one of the biggest school districts in the country. Those 30,000 school workers are set to go back without a contract since their union and the district have not been able to agree on things like a raise. There's some new hope tonight, though, that maybe they're getting close to a deal. Maybe. Listen.
I think we are close to an agreement just because we have a bunch of people out here. We've had a bunch of people in the picket line.
I've been going out with all of my colleagues since last week. It started last week on Tuesday, and now we're here for these 3 days. So we are hoping that we get something out of this.
Maura Barrett is at that rally in Los Angeles now. We can hear it behind you. We can see it behind you, Maura. Kids are going to go back to class tomorrow. At least that's the expectation. Will those school workers, those cafeteria workers, et cetera, have a deal by tomorrow morning, or we think that's not possible?
That's what they're hoping for, Hallie, but both the union and the district have been pretty tight-lipped about where negotiations stand. I know you said you can hear the music behind me. There's also chants ringing out of Si se puede or Yes we can, because they are holding on hope. They're a little bit more confident because the mayor, Karen Bass, here in Los Angeles has gotten involved in those negotiations. But I want to remind you what they're fighting for here and what we keep having conversations about with union workers and the teachers that are here supporting them. There's some references of unfair labor practices at the heart of it all, but realistically what they're looking for is a wage increase. The union is looking for a 30% pay raise over the next few years. They're also looking for increased hours for those part-time employees. The district has come back and said they'll give a 23% increase in addition to a cash bonus, as well as some additional health care benefits. And so the superintendent had said previously that financially the district can't afford to shrink that gap, that 7% gap anymore. But it does seem like over the last 3 days, they've been able to make some headway. They will return to school tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that the negotiations have leveled out. This was just the period of time that they had agreed to strike for originally, Hallie. So this could all happen again if they don't reach an agreement.
80% of the students in this district come from lower income families. We've been talking a lot about what learning loss in the pandemic has meant for all kids, including students from that socioeconomic strata, if you will. How are these kids going to make up those 3 days, this time lost since COVID? How concerned are parents? I get that it's only 3 days, right, in the eyes of some, but that is a question that's come up from families.
I mean, parents have been, as of right now, largely supportive because they know what teachers do. They know what these special aides, the custodians, the bus drivers, how much they contribute to their children's learning. So what we've heard from parents is a lot of support over the last 3 days. But of course, if that goes longer, we might see some more frustration. So that's why you see the mayor getting involved. She says that she wants to correct historic inequities, make sure that they can reopen schools schools, but also make sure that these workers do get what they need in order to have a livable wage, in order to keep providing those services and education for students. So as of now, we're still waiting to hear if there is going to be an ultimate agreement reached. But remember, these workers have been without a contract for the last 2 years, and that time is really, they're in a time crunch right now, and the superintendent doesn't seem like he's budging. So that's what they're looking for when it comes to these bargaining conversations throughout the rest of today, Hallie.
Laura Barrett, thank you very much. Appreciate it. The storm that hammered California this week is now headed east tonight, putting 10 million people at risk for very bad storms overnight. 22 million people are under flood watches. You see these clouds starting to form, rather ominously looking. It doesn't look like much at the moment, but the expectation is a lot of hail, a lot of wind, a lot of water, maybe even some tornadoes could be on the way, similar to what we saw 24 hours ago as we were coming on the air last night in East L.A. You see this funnel cloud there. The National Weather Service says that tornado traveled through the area for half a mile, leaving behind a 50-yard stretch of damage. Let's bring in meteorologist Bill Cairns. Storms are supposed to pick up in intensity tonight and into the overnight hours, right, Bill?
It's already started, but the really, really dangerous stuff will probably be at this time tomorrow when I'm with you, Hallie. That's when we're going to have likely a tornado outbreak, maybe even some strong tornadoes. Tonight, the threat is hail. Large hail can be very damaging. We have had billion-dollar weather disasters from huge hail events and huge hailstorms. Not saying that's going to happen tonight, but we've already had ping-pong-sized ball hail. In this area, this box in yellow here, these are areas that are all under a severe thunderstorm watch until 11 o'clock local time. That includes Oklahoma City, Wichita Falls, McAllister up to Fort Smith, and then portions of the Ozarks here in northern Arkansas and southern Missouri. Here's Oklahoma City. So far, so good. Missing you. We've had reports of ping-pong ball-sized hail with some of these storms. This one just barely missed Stillwater, and they have a huge storm over here by Henrietta. That is heading off to the north. So I think Oklahoma City, probably about another hour or two, some of those storms will head your way. So this is the area at risk tonight, and this is going to go all night, right through the overnight into early tomorrow. It's a hail threat. We don't really think there's going to be that many tornadoes, maybe one or two isolated, and they should be on the weaker end. Then tomorrow will be the better chance for tornadoes. So here's the area of greatest risk of hail, like baseball-sized hail. That would be Wichita Falls to south of Oklahoma City. And then, Hallie, this is the map for tomorrow. And it's one of those nights where you have to make your plans for your family. I'm sure the schools are making plans if they want to release early or not. But this area of red here is a really good chance of strong tornadoes tomorrow. Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, up to Memphis, the same areas, Hallie, we've been talking about all winter with severe weather.
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, that is a familiar map location. You got to hope people are making those plans now. Bill, I'm sure we'll talk again tomorrow. Appreciate it. So it's looking like the earliest we may hear any hints about this Manhattan grand jury investigation into former President Trump is Monday, with jurors meeting secretly today, but on something separate, according to 3 sources. So a lot of the focus right now is on the political back and forth, with Mr. Trump ramping up his attacks, saying the Manhattan district attorney should be removed from office. And that DA, Alvin Bragg, he's clapping back at House Republicans, allies of the former president, calling their requests for his testimony unprecedented. Remember, this all ties back to alleged hush money payments by Mr. Trump to former adult film star Stormy Daniels. Mr. Trump denies any wrongdoing. But if you want to talk about a case legal experts think has more teeth, look here at D.C. This is a lawyer from Mr. Trump. His name's Evan Corcoran, heading into a federal courthouse. Why? For a hearing on the special counsel's investigation into a separate issue, how the former president handled classified documents and his alleged connections to the Capitol attack. Vaughn Hilliard is in West Palm Beach, Florida, where we hear Mr. Trump spent some time golfing with John Voight today, Vaughn, as he is putting out these truth socials. He is clearly not thrilled with this investigation against him, all ahead of this rally on Saturday night, which is being billed as the first formal rally, if you will, of the 2024 campaign of his.
Right. This is really just a holding pattern for Donald Trump at this point. It is out of his hands. He can't control any of these investigations, so he's going on offense largely from his own social media account, calling for the removal as well of special counsel Jack Smith, who is overseeing that documents case that we're talking about. Evan Corcoran is sort of this weird player in all of this, because you said it today, he was at the federal courthouse representing Donald Trump. He is an attorney for Donald Trump in an effort to try to block the testimony of former Vice President Mike Pence as it relates to efforts to overturn the 2020 election. But as soon as tomorrow, Evan Corcoran could be back at the courthouse in front of a grand jury testifying about the classified documents case, because Evan Corcoran served as his attorney in his representation, being a part of the team, the alleged team that signed off, claiming that there were no longer any classified documents here at Mar-a-Lago. But then a couple months after the signing off of that affidavit, well, the FBI came and completed a search warrant, and they found more than 100 classified documents remained here in Mar-a-Lago. So now Evan Corcoran could go before this grand jury to testify about his conversations with Donald Trump, but also turning over even notes and audio recordings of their conversations, Hallie.
Vaughn Hilliard, live for us there in West Palm Beach, where I imagine you'll be posted up a little bit longer. Vaughn, thank you very much. Right now in France, the Eiffel Tower and Versailles, they are shut down because of huge protests in that country, with demonstrators also blocking access to Charles de Gaulle Airport. That's the main international airport, along with a bunch of train stations and ports. Travel is almost impossible, and that includes on roads where some protesters are lighting stuff on fire in the middle of the street. The French government says more than 1 million people turned out all over the country in these demonstrations. People are furious about the French president's push to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Megan Fitzgerald is live for us in Paris. A lot going on, Megan. I see people behind you. Bikes are probably the best way to get around, frankly, given all the travel issues that folks are having. Talk us through it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, today was a show of force throughout the entire country. As you said, 1 million people demonstrating. Here in Paris alone, 800,000 people showed up to take to the streets of Paris. According to the unions, people are angry. They're frustrated. We saw that pouring into the streets, and they say that they're not going to stop. This is just the start. It's also just the start of these strikes, because as you mentioned, we're talking about railway systems, flights, buses, all shut down in many ways, delayed in a lot of ways, and people say that that's just going to continue. Sanitation workers have already extended their strike until next week, and keep in mind, as we've been talking about, we're talking thousands of tons of trash that are lining the streets of Paris. They're trying to make a point. They want Macron to reverse his decision of pushing through this legislation, which increases the retirement age to 64, and they say they're not going to stop until that happens, Hallie.
And there is no sign, right, that Emmanuel Macron's going to back down, right? I mean, at this point, he pushed this through without the approval of Parliament, was able to get this done. I know Macron and his allies feel like this is something that needs to happen just for financial reasons here. Are we right in sort of assessing that both sides are really dug in on this one?
Well, yeah, so yesterday we heard from Macron for the first time since he pushed through this legislation on Thursday, and he doubled down. He basically said, look, didn't want to do this, but I have to do this because the pension system as it is now is in jeopardy of running a deficit, in jeopardy of going bankrupt. He also said that he hopes that in time the French people will be able to see that he's right. He says his only regret here is that he wasn't able to convince the people. But he feels that this is an absolute must. This has to happen. He did it in the first year of his second term. He's got 4 more years to go. He does have some, opposition leaders that are mad at him, of course. Even members of his own party are upset at the way in which he did this. So the big question becomes, how will he be able to govern in the coming years? How effective will he be?
Megan Fitzgerald live for us there in Paris. Megan, thank you very much for being out there. I know it's late. Things are still obviously going on where she is. Coming up here on the show, a Colorado dentist accused of murdering his wife with poison, formally charged today. And the victim's sister now says he's drugged her before. Plus, the Chicago Blackhawks say they will not wear rainbow pride jerseys for warm-ups this weekend because of security concerns. We'll explain in the 5 Things. So a new bill could ban some of what might be your favorite candy in California. We're going to explain in a couple of minutes. But first, a Colorado dentist is in court today, accused of murdering his wife by poisoning her protein shake with cyanide and arsenic. And we're learning he may have tried to drug her before. Dr. James Craig facing those formal first-degree murder charges. And the police affidavit lays out some pretty stunning details, including a timeline for how this all went down. It says arsenic was delivered to his home on March 4th. 2 days later, the documents say his wife, Angela, was hospitalized. Docs show that same day, She texts her husband saying she felt drugged. And listen to what he replied. He says, given our history, I know that must be triggering. Just for the record, I didn't drug you. And if you're like, well, wait, why would he think that would be triggering? Because in the affidavit, Angela's sister says Angela told her she'd been drugged by her husband a few years ago. At that time, he said he was going to commit suicide and didn't want her to be able to stop him. Okay, so jump ahead a week, and the documents show that James Craig gets potassium cyanide delivered to his dental practice on March 13th. He'd apparently been doing online searches for this stuff on his work computer. Angela Craig was hospitalized again on March 14th and died 5 days later. Miguel Almaguer is joining us now. And Miguel, part of the reason why this case is getting so much attention is because of some of those just stunning details that we've just laid out here that are coming out from this arrest affidavit, which shows how quickly things moved.
Yeah, Hallie, that arrest affidavit is 52 pages long, and it clearly lays out the case against Dr. James Craig. It includes that timeline that you were talking about and his alleged internet searches prior to ordering arsenic and potassium cyanide online, which he's accused of. Police say he searched on the internet top 5 undetectable poisons that show no signs of foul play, and is arsenic detectable in autopsy. Investigators also laid out a motive, saying the dentist wanted to start a new life with his lover, an orthodontist from Texas who actually flew to Colorado while his wife was in the hospital dying. Legal experts say it could be damning evidence. We did reach out to Craig's attorney, but we have not received comment or a statement yet, Hallie.
Where does this case go next, Miguel? And what else are we finding out?
Well, so today was the first hearing. The doctor did not enter a plea. He'll be back in court in April. The appearance today was short, only about 10 minutes long. We did learn that James Craig's parents and some of his 6 children were there during the hearing. He didn't seem to address them or even look in their direction. It's a really sordid affair here that will get even messier as we head towards a possible trial.
Miguel Almaguer all over that for us tonight. Thank you. Miguel will have more tonight on the NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, 6:30 Eastern, of course, wherever you get your local NBC News station. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, a court in Michigan has ruled that the parents of a teenager who killed 4 students at a high school in 2021 can stand trial for involuntary manslaughter. This could be a very big deal for setting a legal precedent about whether parents are responsible for the crimes of their children. Prosecutors say the parents didn't secure the gun and didn't address some warning signs. Number 2, the ADL says 2022 was the worst year on record for anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. The new report counts nearly 3,700 cases of anti-Jewish harassment or vandalism or assault. That is up 36% from the year before. Number 3, the Chicago Blackhawks are not going to wear a special warm-up jersey to celebrate Pride Night this weekend. The team's worried that wearing the jerseys could put some of the Russian players in danger when they go home because of anti-gay laws that Russia has passed. The Blackhawks coach calls this an unfortunate situation, saying he and his players were disappointed that the NHL made that call. Number 4, Hyundai and Kia are issuing recalls on more than 570,000 cars, nearly 500,000 cars, because of an issue that could cause parts of them to catch fire. The deal is there's some flaw in the harness used to tow things that could short circuit in the rain and burst into flames. Owners are being told, hey, don't park those cars inside until you get a fix. Number 5, a new study says the autism rates in this country went up between 2018 and 2020. The CDC reports that in 2020, 1 in every 36 8-year-olds was diagnosed with autism. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean more people actually have autism. It could be because there's more awareness around screenings, etc. So, listen, it is possible that Skittles could end up banned in California, along with other candy like Nerds, if a new proposal ends up the law in that state. It is a long shot. It is a super long shot, to the point where even one of the 2 lawmakers pushing this plan acknowledges it's like 0% that Skittles are actually going to get banned. But the point, he says, to shine a spotlight on the chemicals in this kind of candy and food that have been linked to more of a risk of cancer and other serious health problems. We're talking about 5 specific chemicals in stuff like cereal and bread and soda and processed cheese that help make the food last longer, taste better, look better. The lawmaker leading the charge on this hopes that this is going to force manufacturers to find other, less harmful ingredients to make their products. Dr. John Torres is joining us now. Talk us through this. How real is the risk from chemicals in your Skittles? I know, and I will just blow up your spot here. They are a beloved candy for you. You have a particular affinity for them. Give us some context here.
And Hallie, just first and foremost, I do love Skittles, but I try to moderate what I eat there because, you know, it's candy, so I don't want to eat too much of it. But when you look at the health risks, there are associations with these health risks. And by associations, I mean there's nothing directly saying, yes, this causes that, but it's that type of study where you look at and you say, okay, there's some associations. In animal studies, it looks like it could be happening. In human studies, we still don't have a definitive answer. But what this is highlighting is kind of difference between our FDA and our USDA, which regulate our food and regulate what goes into our food, versus the European equivalents of that, the European food associations, where they do it differently. Over there, they try to do things proactively, meaning they say if there's even a slightest possibility this could be happening, we want to go ahead and ban it, and then we'll do the studies to find out if it's safe. Here, if it looks like it's safe, we go ahead and push it through, and then if we find out it's unsafe later, we go ahead and withdraw it. So you can see the differences there. But right now, again, the associations are there, but no direct causal link is there, and I think that's one of the big messages.
But here's the thing, Dr. John, these 5 specific chemicals are already banned in the EU. Why are we still using them here?
And that's part, again, the way these two different entities work and how they do things. When you look at the risks behind these things, you know, the risks they're talking about is kind of a string of lists that are going on. You know, first and foremost, they could be behavioral issues that happen with children and that's probably one of the biggest links we can see out there. Increased risk of cancers in some people, harm to the reproductive system, and damage to the immune system. But what we're also finding out is some people tend to be more sensitive to these issues and could have more issues with them than other people. And so that's part of the confusion here, Hallie.
We just showed part of a letter that was sent from some food industry groups pushing back on this proposal. Again, just a proposal, it's just a bill, it's not law, saying that all 5 of these additives have been thoroughly reviewed by the federal and state systems and many international scientific bodies and continue to be deemed safe. From a doctor's perspective, you know, you look at this, I look at it from a political perspective, and I think, man, these food industry groups, they're a big lobby, right? I mean, is there at least some sense that this is shining a spotlight the way that that lawmaker intended this bill to do?
And I think it is shining a spotlight on this issue here, and I think that's a spotlight that does need to be shined because we do need to make sure that things that go into our body are safe. At the same time, when you look at the studies that have been done, we don't have definitive answers. And so this goes back to the question of, until we have definitive answers, should we ban it or should we say, okay, at this point it looks like it could be safe, so let's go ahead and push it forward. But I think the bottom line is we are seeing in some of these studies that in high consumption rates, so the more you eat, the more the risk is there. The answer is simply, you know, cut back on those. You know, I'm certainly going to cut back on Skittles now after listening to this, but I'm not going to give them up. I'll be honest with you.
Right.
I love Skittles.
No.
So, you know, again, it's one of those things that the more you eat, the more issues you might have with it. So moderation comes into play here, like anything else. And be a label reader. Look at your label, see what's in there. Okay. If it's some of these chemicals, then you don't want to eat them, then don't eat them.
Dr. John Torres, that is some solid advice. Thank you very much.
You bet.
When we come back, our own Tom Costello getting an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at just how high the stakes are in the North Sea off the coast of Norway. We'll tell you what he saw on patrol with NATO for days. Where do you see this? That's coming up next. We've got a rare and exclusive look behind the scenes as NATO ramps up its patrols to defend important oil and gas fields from the Russian Navy. Look at this. You see it here, right? This is what the Norwegian Navy says is a Russian nuclear submarine periscope. Look at that, peeking up right above the water, right over some of Norway's pipelines in the North Sea. That video captured by the Norwegian Air Force, right near where our own Tom Costello spent 3 days on patrol with NATO on the ships through these really sensitive areas between Norway and Scotland. Watch.
These are very vulnerable gas fields and oil fields out off the coast of Norway. Are there submarines, Russian subs, right now practicing their efforts down below, watching over those pipelines? NATO has sensors on the ocean floor listening for Russian activity, but this ship's job is to go out and look for any ship activity that could be in any way threatening the oil and gas platforms.
Tom Costello has made his way back from that NATO patrol. He is joining us back home here in Washington. So what's so interesting here, Tom, is you are right in the center of where there is, frankly, a lot of geopolitical drama, given the tensions between Russia and Western allies after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What was it like to be out there on those front lines?
It was stressful, specifically for the crew. We were with a Norwegian naval/Coast Guard crew, and their assignment, NATO assignment, is to be on patrol, be on the lookout for any suspicious Russian activity. Listen, the NATO has incredible ability to listen for Russian sub-activity, but now they've got to flood the zone with NATO ships because they're trying to discourage Russia from hanging around these sensitive economic areas. I talked to the admiral in charge of the Norwegian Navy about the Russian threat. Here's what he had to say.
This is Murmansk, and it is perhaps the world's largest concentration of nuclear weapons.
Right there, near Murmansk?
Yes.
And it's right across your border?
It is, and it's part of the strategic deterrence between great powers that has been in place after World War II and beyond.
That's Admiral Rune Anderson, who commands the Norwegian Navy and is a NATO admiral as well. He's talking about Russia's nuclear arsenal sitting right across their border. And he was showing me all the Russian sub-activity coming down the west coast of Norway, how they listen for it, how they watch it. And he says they become a lot more unpredictable and aggressive, in his words.
Which probably adds to some of the urgency that you picked up on, right?
Yes.
The idea that there is more activity, that it is more unpredictable, with NATO having this kind of sensor net, if you will, on the ocean floor.
Absolutely. And while we were there, to underscore how serious this is, we were pulled into a secret NATO operation. Essentially, very quickly, we had a Spanish warship on our port. We then had a Dutch warship and a German warship, all part of NATO, coming in and surrounding the biggest gas platform out there, a giant platform. And suddenly, over the top comes a helicopter. And this helicopter lands on the top of the platform. It is the NATO Secretary General with the President of the European Union, standing on top of that platform and making a very definitive statement. We are declaring this an economic priority, critical economic infrastructure for Europe and NATO and the West, and we will defend it. And therefore, the show of force with all of those ships coming all the way from, as I said, even a Spanish warship.
It's incredible. It's incredible to see it. It's incredible that you were there to witness some of that, Tom. Thank you for sharing it with us here. You're going to share more of it, of course, on Nightly News tonight with Lester Holt, 6:30 Eastern. Tom, thank you.
You bet.
Coming up here on this show, a big union repping TV and movie writers says its members would not get replaced with AI, but they may still be able to use it. What this might mean for the stuff you watch and who or what gets credit. Plus, where rescuers found a group of boys lost in a storm drain in Staten Island. We've got that 911 call later in the local. We've got to get to some breaking news out of Denver, where the school board there, in just the last couple of minutes, is laying out a new plan to bring armed police officers back to their schools after a shooting there just yesterday. Watch.
The Board of Education will request that the Denver Police Department ensure every armed police officer is appropriately trained in the use of firearms, de-escalation techniques.
This is after a 17-year-old shot two school administrators at a high school in the district about 24 hours ago. As we're just learning in the past 60 seconds that the suspect died after shooting himself. One of the victims is still in serious condition right now. We know the other has been discharged from the hospital in good condition. We're going to have more coverage when we take you live to the ground from Denver at the top of the next hour, just about 15 minutes from now. Also today here in Washington, the father of a Parkland school shooting victim was arrested in a very intense moment at a gun hearing on Capitol Hill. This father seemed to shout at a Republican lawmaker while he was speaking during this hearing. Democratic Congressman Maxwell Frost tweeted this video. You're seeing it here, saying that the dad was taken out of the courtroom and then arrested. You can see that person on the ground there. Capitol Police say he was not put in jail. Here's what we heard from Republican Congressman Pat Fallon after this happened.
Is this an insurrection? So will they be held to the same, I don't want another January 6th, do we?
Yeah, if they're trying to overthrow the government, they ought to be held to the same standard, but I think they're trying to express their views.
Whoa. Does the Capitol Police not do their jobs? What the hell's going on?
The hearing opened up debate as it was related to the Second Amendment on gun deaths and some other gun regulations. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Northeast Bureau, Pennsylvania police responding to a 911 call found more than 150 reptiles, including this alligator and 60 venomous snakes inside a home. Police say somebody inside was dead when they got to the scene. It's not clear how. 3 other adults and a little kid also lived in that house. From our Chicago Bureau, Customs and Border Protection officials in Chicago confiscated more than 300 counterfeit designer items, stuff like fake Rolexes, etc., in 2 parcels from Thailand. There was also some fake Louis Vuitton, Tory Burch, etc. If the items had been real, they would have cost something like $400,000. From our New York Bureau, listen to this.
What's the address in San Ann?
We don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah, we're stuck in the sewers.
You're stuck where?
In the sewers.
What you just heard was part of a 911 call from 5, 11, and 12-year-old kids who had gotten lost, as you just heard, in a sewer, in a storm drain. The FDNY dispatcher worked with those kids to get them out. They were eventually found unhurt, thank goodness. Police say the kids were just playing outside. They got lost. Obviously, they're not going to have any charges filed against them there. Right now, a big labor union representing TV and film writers is trying to make sure that a writer cannot be replaced with artificial intelligence. But at the same time, it's also proposing in some instances writers can use AI to help them. And it all comes down to how the writers will get paid. In a tweet, the Writers Guild of America says AI-generated text cannot be considered in determining writing credit, while emphasizing that AI doesn't actually create anything. It generates a regurgitation of what it's fed. So basically, they're saying, hey, you can't say that AI gets the credit for something if a human being input the commands into the chatbot or whatever. It all came up as the WGA is negotiating for a new contract with the alliance that reps some big studios and networks, including our parent company, NBC Universal's studios. The current contract is up May 1st. We reached out to that alliance for comment on this plan, but haven't heard back. Let me bring in Jake Ward, because what's so interesting here, Jake, is it possible? I mean, as we talk about the way that AI is becoming more and more of a force in all of our lives, could the next Oscar-winning screenplay come from a chatbot? Is that where we're going here?
I mean, that is certainly the worry that the Writers Guild of America and so many other creative industries are worried about here, Hallie. I mean, right, you're talking about creative job after creative job that we have seen just in the last few months since ChatGPT made its debut. You know, suddenly everybody's realizing, oh, wow, I write for a living. Oh, wow, I come up with language and ideas for a living. Oh, geez, this thing does a very, very good impersonation of human creativity. And that's why the Writers Guild of America seems to be trying to come up with these new guidelines. They're pretty interesting. You know, on the one hand, they say that you can use ChatGPT to basically create, do the research for you. You can use it for research material, but you cannot use it as source material. You cannot use it to feed somebody else's screenplay in and out pops an original looking thing. And you can't adapt AI-generated material. All of this is pretty interesting. You know, and the good news for most creative industries is at the moment, the courts do not seem predisposed to give AI writing credit or credit for anything. There's a guy named Dr. Stephen Thaler, who's been trying for years in court to prove that his AI-generated piece of art should get its own copyright credit. The courts keep shooting him down. That's been the sort of litmus test for most of these things. So right now, it doesn't seem like AI is poised to actually take the credit away from screenwriters, which, as you know, is what they hate the most. But it is certainly poised to be part of their job, as it is so many jobs.
What we think about, too, I think, when we look at, the AI revolution, right, and as you point out, poised to take over a lot of different jobs, the Indeed.com, the job site, there was some analysis that it saw a 140% increase in, AI references. But what's also interesting is last year they looked at NFT-related listings. Those are down in the last year, right? In other words, is this like NFTs? Kind of a flash in the pan, or do you think that AI stuff is here to stay when it comes to the way that we're integrating it with the work that we do?
I think this is a fundamental shift to how human society is about to work, for better or for worse. And it has to do, of course, with the ability of these systems to impersonate human creativity and human expertise. Now, again, it's just a parrot. It's not a genius, but it can stand in for all kinds of things. And that's why you've seen ChatGPT and the rest, not only trying to replace the work of writers and so forth, but they're trying to make it so that you and I can simply create software without knowing how to write code. These sorts of knowledge work jobs are beginning to see AI move into them in a way that, only blue-collar jobs had been touched even a couple of years before, Hallie.
Jake Ward, it is fascinating. Thank you for being the tip of the spear for us. Still to come here on the show, March Madness is back tonight after that first bracket-busting weekend that I'm sure you are still stinging from. Steve Kornacki is, but he's still joining us from the big board in just a minute to see if the clock's about to strike midnight for the tournament's Cinderellas. So out of the 20 million plus brackets submitted to ESPN, not a single one survived the first couple days of this year's NCAA men's basketball tournament. On a personal note, I'm 30th right now in our NBC News Now pool, but my winner's still alive. Question is, are they going to survive the Sweet 16? It's been fun, man, right? It's been fun to watch so far, and there's been some history, too. The first time ever that a brother and a sister, you're looking at them, both made the Sweet 16 for the same school. You see them here, Gabriela and Jaime Jaquez for UCLA. Here's the full schedule for tonight up on the screen. Plenty to watch. Get your popcorn ready. But if you're looking for some real drama, that's tomorrow when Princeton tries to become the first 15 seed to make the Final Four. Steve Kornacki is joining us now. So, Steve, talk us through what is standing out to you the most from the tournament on the men's side so far.
Yeah, it was some bracket carnage on the men's side here. Here's the Sweet 16 as it stands going into it here. You can see Princeton, the big underdog that made it through. How about this? Think of it this way, though. North Carolina, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, the blue bloods of the sport. Not a single one of them is in the Sweet 16. That has not happened for 43 years. There are two number one seeds, Alabama and Houston, still alive, but there are some teams that are here that weren't expected to be here. That is one of the big themes of the first two rounds. A lot of underdogs. Look at this. There were 32 games played in the first two rounds. 13 of the winners, 41% were lower seeds. So you had a lot of upsets, and the number one seeded Kansas Jayhawks, the defending national champions, they lost to Arkansas in the second round. Believe it or not, sixth straight tournament that the defending champ has not made it out of the first weekend. The Big Ten, big conference, 8 teams, 7 of them are already gone. There's only Michigan State left from the Big Ten. Kind of a big bust for them. We mentioned Princeton from the Ivy League. They are the fourth 15 seed to ever make it to the Sweet 16. We'll see if they can keep going. And by the way, if all of that carnage on the bracket makes you feel bad about your own bracket, don't feel bad, because more than 20 million brackets were submitted through ESPN, and not a single one of them is unblemished at this point. It took just 25 games for every single one of those 20 million brackets to go bust.
I heard yours has gone bust as well, Steve. I hate to call you out.
It's going bust in every imaginable way, starting with my national. I always say my national champion pick is the kiss of death, and I did it to Duke this year.
Oh, man, Steve. Let me ask you this, because you talked about Princeton, and people love an underdog here, but give me the gut check. Does Princeton really have a shot?
Yeah, I mean, this is the only time in these kids' lives these Princeton kids are going to be called underdogs, but they certainly are underdogs right now. As we say, the fourth 15 seed ever to make it this far. So how have the others done? Well, last year, St. Peter's from New Jersey was a 15. They actually won in the Sweet 16. They knocked off Purdue. They lost in the Elite Eight, 1 game short of the Final Four. Oral Roberts made it in 2021. They almost won their Sweet 16 game. And then you had the Florida Gulf Coast back in 2013. They lost to Florida. So we have seen a 15 seed win in the Sweet 16. We've yet to see one make the Final Four. Princeton gets Creighton, the Blue Jays, on Friday night. Maybe they could be the first.
Real quick, I got to ask you about the women's tournament, too, because it's the first time in 25 years that 2 number 1 seeds lost before the second weekend. Indiana and Stanford going down. Who's looking good right now? Who do you got on that side?
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't normally see as many upsets on the women's side. You mentioned Miami getting that win over Indiana. How about this? The Miami women's team upset Indiana to make the Sweet 16. The Miami men's team upset Indiana to make the Sweet 16. They both beat the same school. But who's looking good? It's the team that came in as the favorite, the defending national champion, South Carolina. They are undefeated. They've rolled through the first few rounds. They got to get through it. They're playing in South Carolina to get to the Final Four. So until we see otherwise, South Carolina remains the prohibitive favorite in the women's tournament.
Steve Kornacki, I wish you the best of the bracket luck for whatever is left of your bracket. And we'll talk again, I'm sure, after the weekend. Appreciate it.
I'm just enjoying the games at this point, but thanks.
Us too. That's a wrap for this hour. More coverage picks up right now. We're coming on the air with the app everyone loves or loves to hate, front and center on the Hill. The snippy and surprising moments from a hearing we've been waiting for months, and plenty of headlines as lawmakers think about banning TikTok because of its ties to China. Tonight, we'll get into why they're not happy with what the CEO had to say and how this fight fits into the bigger power struggle between Washington and Beijing. Plus, in literally just the last couple of minutes, we're learning more about how the suspect in that Denver school shooting died, as the city's school board is just now voting to put armed officers back in schools. We're live on the ground. And a police officer in Virginia will be fired tonight after killing an unarmed black man. The video we're just getting from that shooting and what we're hearing from his mother, emotional and angry. Plus, the new and, frankly, bizarre details about a dentist charged with killing his wife by poisoning her protein shake. We've got more on that in just a minute. And is it dangerous to taste the rainbow? A couple of lawmakers in California think so, out with a new plan to ban Skittles. So what's really their end game? And what's up with chemicals in candy? And could a chatbot write the next Oscar-winning screenplay? How a top union in Hollywood's trying to get out ahead of the AI revolution. That's coming up later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and listen, it's not like TikTok CEO was going to have it easy today, right? Facing down lawmakers who think his app is bad news. But tonight, TikTok is definitely on defense after a hugely high-profile hearing got spicy. A hearing that TikTok's spokesperson says was dominated by political grandstanding. The big issue during this hearing, TikTok's ties to China. Watch.
Do any ByteDance employees in China, including engineers, currently have access to U.S. data?
Congressman, I would appreciate this. This is a complex topic. Today, all data is stored by default.
No, it's not that complex. Yes or no, do they have access to user data?
We have, after Project Texas is done, the answer is no. Congressman, I have seen no evidence that the Chinese government has access to that data. They have never asked us. We have not provided.
Well, you know what? I find that actually preposterous.
So let's look at this in buckets, right? The three big things that Congress is focusing on here. First, national security and data privacy. You've got the U.S. worried that the app could be used to spy on people in the U.S. because it's owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company. Second, there's a concern about the content itself, which lawmakers think could end up being dangerous and misleading. Things like mental health and healthcare generally. And that leads into our third bucket here, the way that specifically this app affects kids and how addictive it can be. You've seen those viral challenges. Lawmakers have seen them, too. They brought those up, including one that in one case apparently led to the death of a 10-year-old. There's a lot of reasons why this is so high stakes, with considerations by the Biden administration, by Congress, to maybe ban the app altogether in this country. Even as TikTok tries to make the case, it's too big to ban, with 150 million Americans using it. Now, ideally, the Biden administration wants ByteDance to sell off TikTok altogether. But China's being clear as recently as today that a forced sale is a non-starter, saying that would seriously hurt investors from multiple countries. Hallie Vitale joins us now. And Hallie, central to this, right, is the idea that lawmakers were so concerned about China having access to U.S. user data. And TikTok has said and did say, you know, listen, it's owned by a Chinese parent company, not by the Chinese government. But lawmakers, frankly, rolled their eyes at that argument. Explain that.
Yeah, you watched them do it in the clips that you showed, and then, frankly, over the 5+ hours that he was here testifying. In part, it took so long because it's just a massive committee over here in the House on the Energy and Commerce side, but also because every member clearly wanted to get their questions answered, and a lot of the answers were not necessarily satisfying, or they didn't make them feel better leaving the room than they felt walking in. In fact, several of these lawmakers said that their concerns were even greater after hearing all of these hours of testimony. And in part, it's because of the role that the Chinese government could be playing, and many in our national security apparatuses fear they are playing, in terms of ByteDance, the Chinese company, giving the government access to this kind of data and material. Now, again, TickTock says that's not what's happening, and the way that he kind of tried to push back against this idea is by saying that none of the problems here have to deal with ownership. Instead, it's more about content moderation, all of the different things that go into an algorithm. And those are things that other social media companies are actually already dealing with. Places like Facebook and Twitter, when you talk about dis and misinformation, we've had those conversations here on the Hill before. We're still going to be having them. TikTok's trying to slide themselves into that lane, but that's not the only problem they have. They have a national security problem.
Well, and to that point, Hallie, TikTok is also at the center of what is a broader issue between the U.S. and China.
Yeah, they're coming in here at this moment where tensions are so high, whether it's over the Chinese air balloon. You have bipartisan support here in Congress. One of the select committees that the Republicans created with their majority is a select committee focusing on China. They actually have another hearing tonight. This is one of the few points of bipartisan commonality, looking overseas and trying to mitigate and raise awareness about this threat from China. The fact that TikTok now is part of that conversation is really important because it's one that many lawmakers are having here in Washington all the time, and it's coming against the backdrop of the fact that millions of people use this app. It's something that TikTok highlighted before they got to the Hill. Lawmakers are aware that TikTok's been trying to do sort of a charm offensive in the last few weeks, whether it's ads on DC airwaves or just trying to show that they might be like too big to ban just because they have so many millions of users. But a lot of the lawmakers I've talked to say, all right, you might have millions of users, but we still have these concerns.
You know, I'm very obsessed and very into this idea of like who is defending TikTok. We've seen Congressman Jamal Bowman, for example, come out as kind of their first big ally on Capitol Hill. And part of the dynamic here is how, frankly, Hallie, like, and you know, not much is bipartisan on the Hill these days. That's kind of the cliche to say. This sure is bipartisan, right? Like, these are Democrats and Republicans in large part who are coming out against TikTok. Talk about the TikTok. Like, who on the outside besides TikTok is defending TikTok here? We are hearing from some organizations on this.
From some organizations and, frankly, the users, the creators. Yesterday, TikTok flew them to Capitol Hill so that they could do a press conference with Congressman Jamal Bowman and some other lawmakers who are sort of on the defend TikTok side of this. I do think it's important to note, though, like, yes, a lot of lawmakers, almost all of them that I talk to, have concerns about national security here. But there are some who say, look, a ban is not inevitable, and the Biden administration has said this too. It's not that we absolutely 100% have to ban TikTok. The Chinese company ByteDance just has to divest. They have to do a forced sale of this company. That's not something that the Chinese government wants to hear, but that's the ultimatum that's been issued. So there are some lawmakers who are sort of like crossing their fingers. They like the platform. They want to keep using it. They think that that's the way that this has to go. But at the same time, it doesn't look like that's where it's going. And it's why you saw these creators come to the Hill yesterday saying, look, this isn't just about the latest viral dance craze. This is about how I educate my students, how I reach out to other people as part of my small business. They tried to make a local economics argument for this on the Hill yesterday, too.
Hallie Vitale covering all of it, all things TikTok, as we often do on this show. Al, thank you very much. Right now, school workers are rallying in Los Angeles as we speak, as students are getting ready to head back to school tomorrow after 3 days out of class because of a strike that shut down one of the biggest school districts in the country. Those 30,000 workers, cafeteria workers, et cetera, teachers, aides, they're set to go back tomorrow with no contract since their union and the district hasn't been able to agree on stuff like a raise. Listen to what we're hearing from some of them.
We're tired. We want our respect. We want to get our wages right. And, you know, it's been unfair up to this point. So hopefully, you know, they can come to the table and we talk business.
Maura Barrett is live for us in L.A. I see the people behind you. We can hear some of the folks behind you here. They are not letting up, even as they're getting ready to go back to school with no actual resolved contract here, no resolution to this dispute.
Yeah, that's the issue, Hallie, and I'm not even going to try to battle with this band's audio, but I do want to give you a sense of how many people showed up at this rally today. They're starting to disperse just a little bit, but there's still thousands out here representing those 30,000 custodians, bus drivers, maintenance workers, people who teachers say make school bearable and make the education better for those students every day. And so teachers have been out here supporting the union workers as well. But even though this looks like a celebration, they're not at that point yet. The negotiations are still stalled, even though the union and the district are at the bargaining table. I want to give you a quick refresher of what they're asking for. The union has asked for a 30% wage increase year over year, and also some additional hours for part-time workers. They also allege the district has engaged in some unfair labor practices. Meanwhile, the district has come back and said they'll give a 23% raise, as well as some added health benefits. But the union is saying they really need to get back up to that 30%. Now, both sides have been pretty tight-lipped throughout this negotiation, but we do know bargaining is going on. Mayor Karen Bass has got involved as well because she wants schools to get reopened, but she also wants these workers to be fairly compensated. And so there's a lot of new positivity expressed on both sides since the mayor got involved. But the end of this 3-day strike is only coming to an end because that was the original plan. That's what they agreed to, and it doesn't mean that there has been a new agreement reached, Hallie.
How much, you talked about the new mayor in LA there, Mayor Bass, how much is she, so much of this is her having to thread the needle here, Maura, explain that.
Absolutely, and this is a challenge for a new mayor. This is just some of the first few months on the job. The last major strike they saw here was back in 2019, before students were removed from classes because of COVID-19, obviously. And so parents right now are supporting this strike, but obviously in the long term, they want their kids to get that education. They want the mayor to support their teachers and their students, but they also, the superintendent is looking for support from the mayor as well. So it is a very fine line to navigate there, especially when all of these people we've talked to over the last 3 days have expressed extreme frustration with this new superintendent, as well as a different picture than it was back in 2019. So it's still a political conversation. It's a continued conversation about workers' rights in this country right now, and the fact that these essential workers, as the district recognizes them as, are living on the poverty line or below it, and that's something that they're looking to see change.
Maura Barrett, right in the thick of it there, out in LA this evening. Maura, thank you very much. I want to get to some breaking news coming out of Denver now, where we're just learning in the past few minutes that the 17-year-old high school student who shot 2 administrators at a Denver high school died overnight after shooting himself. The school board has just voted now, too, to bring armed police officers back into their schools. Here's what they're telling the superintendent to do. Listen.
To offer and externally fund as many as 2 armed police officers and as many as 2 additional mental health professionals.
Over at the state capitol, high schoolers have been rallying today, telling lawmakers they want to see more done to stop gun violence when they go to class. They were just there earlier this month asking for the same thing after a 16-year-old was shot and killed outside the same high school. NBC's Morgan Chesky is on the ground live for us in Denver. Morgan, I know that you have literally just walked out of this meeting where there have been some major developments here as it relates to what families, what parents have been asking for in the wake of this school shooting. Talk us through it.
Yeah, Hallie, the superintendent was taking questions for the first time since this shooting took place just steps away from me in front of Denver's East High School. My top question for the district leader here was, were they aware that before this shooting even took place, this 17-year-old gunman was already on probation for a firearms charge that has been confirmed to NBC News by a law enforcement source? The superintendent told me, Hallie, that the district was unaware, but the staff here at East High School was aware. I followed up saying, just so I understand you correctly, you had staff and administrators at a high school that were aware, but the leaders were not. He says that is correct. We have many campuses across the district. And I said, I followed up, Hallie, by asking, even if a student has a firearm-related charge, they're still allowed to come to school. And the superintendent said, yes, that is correct if the right program is in place. Now, of course, this only raises more questions right now. We do know that this 17-year-old gunman had been expelled from a neighboring district last year for somehow violating district policy or procedure. The administrators there couldn't divulge exactly why, but this law enforcement source, Hallie, said that back in 2021, it was actually classmates of this gunman who flagged his social media to police that there were guns that he was posting about, and upon a visit to his home in the greater Denver area, according to this source, police found a rifle, a large magazine, and a silencer in his room. A felony charge followed, but the court decided to place this individual on probation and not follow through with that felony charge. So that is what we found out literally within the last 15 minutes or so, Hallie.
It is an incredible bit of reporting here, Morgan, and I want to sort of follow up on this with you because your line of questioning is really important here. One of the big questions after the school shooting happened just about 24 hours ago, we talked about it on the show last night. 2 administrators were hurt in this shooting. One of the big questions was, why was this student on a safety plan in the first place? Because this student was under the conditions, had to be patted down walking into the school. As you know, it was during that pat down that this gun was found and the shooting happened here. What you are saying is that we now have the answer to that question, right, of why this student was on the safety plan in the first place.
Certainly a contributing factor, although district officials here were quick to say that there were certain things they could not divulge. However, you're exactly right. And I should point out that the superintendent also said that the administrator here at Denver's East High School, who typically patted down this 17-year-old, was not here yesterday. And instead, these 2 other administrators took that role on, and seconds later, gunfire erupted. Both of those men were wounded, and that 17-year-old gunman fled this scene only to be found 50 miles away late yesterday by members of a SWAT team. His body located not too far away from a car. We're awaiting official results from the coroner as to the cause of death there. Hallie?
Morgan, one of the things that parents had been asking for was armed security back in schools. Now, I believe that school had previously had armed security. It went away around 2020, 2021. It sounds like maybe it's coming back now.
It's definitely coming back. We heard from the superintendent, who says that he's pledging to bring armed security back to what they call every comprehensive high school in Denver school district after this stunning shift in 2020, Hallie, where the school board voted unanimously to not have school resource officers on site. That initially stemmed from the conversation following protests here in Denver after the death of George Floyd and the concerns that law enforcement may disproportionately target students of color. Hallie?
Morgan Chesky live for us in Denver with that developing news this evening. Morgan, thank you very much for racing to a camera and bringing that to us. Appreciate it. We are getting the first look at body cam footage in the shooting of an unarmed black man just outside D.C. last month, as the police chief in that Virginia county says he plans to fire the officer who killed him. The video is pretty dark. It's not clear who's speaking in it, but we want to warn you, it's hard to watch.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Stop reaching! Stop reaching! Shots fired!
The video does not clearly show what the officers saw before the shooting. We want to be clear on that. But here's what we do know about Timothy McCree Johnson. He was 37 years old. Police chased him because they thought he stole sunglasses from a mall. One police officer is on modified restricted duty. That's what they call it. The other is soon to be fired, with the Fairfax County chief here explaining why. Listen.
The officers' actions do not meet the expectations of our police department. They do not comport with our general orders, our policies, and our procedures.
I want to bring in Yamiche Sandor, who's covering this for us here. And the attorney for the family here calls this, Yamiche, an execution. They seem to be making the point here that shoplifting, if that is what was happening here, is not a crime punishable by death.
Certainly. What we really heard from this family and from the victim's mother, which is really Timothy Johnson's mother, is that they don't feel like this was a justified shooting. They just don't believe, even if he was guilty of what would have been a misdemeanor, which is stealing sunglasses, that he should have been shot. Take a listen to what they said.
Justice delayed is justice denied. This officer should not have his freedom at this point.
No parent should not have to view the killing of their child.
Now, the Virginia Commonwealth attorney, he says that he's going to be conducting an investigation, looking to try to make a decision sooner rather than later on this case, though there's no exact timeline here. But the family's basically saying there's nothing to really wait and see here. This is someone who was shot in a wooded area. He was chased out. He was outside the mall, so he sets off a number of alarms, police say, before police start chasing him in the middle of the street. So they just really think that this is a tough situation. It is, I should say, really hard to see exactly what happens in this video. It's not as cut and dry as some of the other videos that we've seen, but the family says it's pretty clear to them that these officers need to be arrested.
What are the key? The Fairfax chief is talking about how there are more investigations. Obviously, that there is an ongoing investigation, more answers that they want to get. What are the outstanding questions? What are the big questions you need to figure out here as this moves forward?
The big question, I think, is going to be, just having covered a lot of these cases, did these officers fire? Did they really have reasonable fear for their life? This was someone who it seems like was running away from them, someone who was not armed. The investigators looked and searched that wooded area. They found some sunglasses, but they didn't find any gun, no firearm, no sort of weapon. So I think the big question is going to be, did these officers have the justification to take this lethal force? And of course, we saw that one officer getting fired with the police chief saying they did not follow the proper protocols for use of force there. So it's going to be definitely something we'll keep watching.
Michelle Sandor, thank you. Appreciate it. The storm that slammed California this week is now heading east as we speak, putting 10 million people at risk for really intense weather overnight. 22 million people are under flood watches. And look at this. The rain is already coming down pretty hard in Oklahoma. Want to show you some of the flooding that you can see there. Not great. Plus, that's it. What looks like hail. More of that, lots of wind, lots of water, maybe even some tornadoes could be on the way. Tornadoes perhaps similar to what we saw 24 hours ago as we were coming on the air last night in East LA. The National Weather Service says that twister traveled through the area for half a mile, leaving behind a 50-yard stretch of damage. Let's bring in meteorologist Bill Caron. So, Bill, it's going to just intensify overnight and even into tomorrow morning and throughout the day, right? What's the expectation here?
The expectation is for a possible tornado outbreak, maybe even strong tornadoes. And then if we know we're going to get strong tornadoes, the million-dollar question every time is, is it out in the middle of a field where it doesn't hit anything, or does it go through a town and we have a, disaster? So we'll be dealing with that tomorrow right at this time, because that's when the outbreak will be at its peak. This evening, a lot of thunderstorms. We've already had a lot of reports of hail in areas of Oklahoma. We have a new flash flood warning in the Ozarks. I never like to see really heavy rain in mountainous areas. That's when it gets scary. That's when the runoff is really quick and the water can rise quickly. Oklahoma City, thunderstorm almost right over the top of you in the southeast of town. Probably some small hail will be reported with this over the next hour or two. No severe thunderstorm warning, but again, there's some active lightning with that. So just stay inside, duck inside for the next half hour and let that pass. Tomorrow's really the day that we're most concerned with. You obviously see the big red bullseye. That's a moderate risk of severe weather. We only have one higher category. Obviously, it's called a high risk, and we get a couple of those every spring. So this is next to highest, and there's a chance they even could upgrade this tomorrow morning. So the storms are going to form over towards the Texas-Louisiana border, and then they're going to move through areas of Louisiana, especially northern Louisiana, almost all of Arkansas, and then spread into Mississippi and Tennessee as we go towards tomorrow evening. This hatched area is where we think we have a chance in EF2 tornado. We just showed you the picture in Los Angeles. That was 110-mile-per-hour winds, and that's what we call an EF1. There's a scale. It goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 being the strongest. Extremely rare. Those are the ones that just, the only thing left is like the foundation of the house. Hopefully we don't get any of those, but we will have a chance of some EF2 or EF3, maybe even EF4 tomorrow. So that's where it gets really serious. And then, of course, you mentioned the flooding threat. I already mentioned that flash flood warning right here, but all along the Ohio River up into southern Indiana and Ohio, even West Virginia, it's just going to pour on and off for the next 2 to 3 days. So that's the area we're going to be watching. And the highest rainfall totals are projected southern Illinois and southern Indiana, and a lot of river flooding right through the weekend in those spots. And Hallie, it's still March. We still can get snow, and this storm will have just enough of it to be annoying, especially from Milwaukee up to Green Bay. Possibility of about 4 inches of the white stuff. Not quite done with winter yet.
The snow annoying, the tornadoes, that's the scary stuff,
Yeah,
Bill. I know that you will be on high alert for that tonight and tomorrow. We'll probably be talking again. Appreciate it. So listen, it's looking like the earliest we may hear any hints about this Manhattan grand jury investigation into former President Trump is Monday, with jurors meeting secretly today, but on a separate issue, according to 3 sources. So a lot of the focus right now is on the political back and forth, with Mr. Trump ramping up his attacks, saying the Manhattan district attorney should be removed from office, and that DA, Alvin Bragg, clapping back at House Republicans, calling their requests for his testimony unprecedented. Remember, this all ties back to alleged hush money payments by Mr. Trump to former adult film star Stormy Daniels. Mr. Trump denies doing anything wrong, But if you want to talk about a case that legal experts think has more teeth, look at the one here in D.C. and look at this guy walking into a courtroom here. This is Evan Corcoran. He's an attorney for Mr. Trump. He's heading into a federal courthouse because of a hearing on the special counsel's investigation into how the former president handled classified documents and his alleged connections to the Capitol attack. Vaughn Hilliard is in West Palm Beach, Florida. And Vaughn, you know, we hear Mr. Trump was golfing with John Voight today. Can you hear me, pal? I don't know if Vaughn can hear me. Just give me like a thumbs up if you can hear me, friend.
Right, this Saturday, Hallie, is going to be that first major rally of his 2024 presidential campaign. In the meanwhile, he's really been bunkered down here at Mar-a-Lago, as well as hitting the golf course there. And for Donald Trump, you know, this is really out of his control at this point. He has no say over ultimately who goes before the grand jury in Manhattan or whether charges are brought against him or not. For Donald Trump, that is why you see in his social media posts, he's called for the removal of District Attorney Alvin Bragg. He's called for the removal of Special Counsel Jack Smith, as well as Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis and New York Attorney General Letitia James. There is a lot that is colliding here at once. His own attorney, as soon as tomorrow, may have to go and testify before a grand jury in Washington, D.C. over the classified documents case pertaining to his own conversations with his attorney after the FBI entered and executed a search warrant of Mar-a-Lago last August and found more than 100 classified documents after his own attorney suggested that they had turned over all such documents. So this is a really complicating moment for Donald Trump, and that's why this Tuesday or the Saturday rally in Texas is going to be notable, because for him, this is about trying to turn this into a politically advantageous issue here, because if he does have to go to trial, it is going to go run completely perpendicular to his own presidential efforts. Hallie.
Vaughn Hilliard, live for us there in West Palm Beach, Florida. A total pros pro, bearing through even with no earpiece in. Shout out to his producer, Kevin Arhelis, as well, for doing his best Anchorman impression and getting Vaughn that question. Thanks to you both. Right now, let's take it to Paris, where there are major protests. This is a live picture here on the right side of your screen. You can see police out in the streets. You can see demonstrators that had been out in the streets. All of this as those protesters are shutting down the Eiffel Tower and Versailles and making travel tough. Demonstrators blocking access to the main airport there, Charles de Gaulle, along with a bunch of train stations and ports. You had protesters lighting stuff on fire, too, in the middle of the street, so it's not like it was any easier to get around on the road in some parts of the city. The French government says more than 1 million people turned out all over the country in these demonstrations. Folks are furious about the French president's push to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Megan Fitzgerald is live for us in Paris, where I think if it is not closing in on midnight, it is now closing in on 1 a.m. if my time math is right. It may not be. Point is, it's still super active in the middle of the night after a major day of protests in that country yet again.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's been 10 hours now, about 10 hours since the protests began. They're still happening in different pockets of the city. Now, they were here behind me here just a couple of minutes ago. Police arrived. They dispersed the crowd. You can see they're, well, did they move? Okay, looks like they're moving now, but that's what it is. The police are on the move, going to different protest locations where demonstrators are demonstrating, but now at this hour, it's turning into agitators. So we're seeing fires that are being lit. Earlier today, we saw clashes with police responding with tear gas. People are angry. People are upset. They also say that this is just the start. And we've been seeing these protests for the last several days, since Thursday, when Emmanuel Macron pushed through that legislation, bypassing a vote in Parliament. And people are outraged. And so obviously today is the biggest that we've seen. I mean, unions are saying some 800,000 people took to the streets of Paris alone. We saw that steady stream of protesters coming by. You really tend to believe that that is an accurate estimate. People are outraged because they say that the government is not listening to them. Macron is not listening to them, and that he pushed through this legislation in an undemocratic way, which is why they say this is just the start, Hallie.
So, but Megan, help us understand what is the end game here, right? Because these demonstrators are making very clear how they feel. Emmanuel Macron is making very clear he's not going to back down and change this plan to raise the retirement age. So that's an impasse. How does it get resolved?
Well, you know, that's the big question here, because we heard from Macron yesterday when he did an interview with French journalists, and he doubled down. Didn't show any sign of being willing to compromise in any way at all. Basically saying that he hated that he had to do this, but he had to do it because the pension system as it stands right now is in jeopardy of running a deficit. It's in jeopardy of going bankrupt, and that he hopes that in the future the French people will be able to see that he got it right. The French people aren't hearing that. What they're seeing is that he's not listening to what they're telling them. They don't want the retirement age to be increased. They're saying that they're not budging. We have Macron that's saying he's not budging. All of this happening when you've got, you know, legislators and people of Macron's own party that are upset with him. He's got 4 more years to go, so it certainly brings into question how effective he will be for the rest of his term, Hallie.
Megan Fitzgerald laying it all out for us there live in Paris. I'll let you go grab an umbrella, Megan. Thank you so much. Coming up here on the show, the grocery store aisles in California could look a little different pretty soon, at least those checkout aisles, while lawmakers there are trying to ban some candy that you may love. Plus, a new study says bacteria from one specific kind of food could be behind more than 500,000 UTIs every year. That's in the 5 things. Stay with us. We've got some breaking news coming into us. 2 U.S. officials telling our White House team that the U.S. and Canada are expected to announce a new deal tomorrow that would basically let both countries turn away anybody trying to seek asylum by crossing their borders other than an authorized way, essentially. Okay, so left side of your screen, this is President Biden. He has just landed. Well, it's his plane. He has just landed in Ottawa. That's Air Force One. It's a tight shot of the door because we expect to see the president emerge any minute ahead of this really critical meeting with the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Should happen any second. We'll see if the president walks up, maybe takes a couple questions from the cameras. No expectation he will. You never know. Monica Alba is also live for us in Ottawa, awaiting the president's arrival there, Mon. Tell us about this deal. Explain it, and then I have a couple of questions for you on it.
So this was a major pressure point heading into this anticipated meeting, Hallie, specifically as it relates to the surge in migration we've seen now from the northern border. Often when we're talking about this major regional challenge from really the entirety of the Western Hemisphere, there's a lot of focus on the southern border with Mexico, where you do see, of course, so many people seeking asylum when they enter the United States. But recently we have seen more and more migrants, not just from Latin America, but really from all over the world, even places like Yemen and Turkey, coming to Canada, flying there essentially, entering through that kind of port of entry, and then walking and crossing over through upstate New York, essentially, to get into the United States in this part that is known as Roxham Road, that really is essentially going through the woods to try to cross without authorization. And so this is something that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has wanted some help from the U.S. in renegotiating an agreement that was in place from about 2004. So he says they need to update this because this is something Canada had not encountered to this degree in some time. And it comes, of course, as the U.S. and President Biden is dealing with this major surge in migration from all around, right? So as we're seeing President Biden arriving here in Ottawa, we're learning, Hallie, according to 2 U.S. officials, that tomorrow, after he has this meeting with the Canadian Prime Minister, officially they will be able to announce an agreement. Now, we haven't seen the exact terms of this deal. Not everything is finalized until it's finalized, so that's why we're caveating and saying we expect this to be rolled out formally tomorrow, but it is one of the main topics of conversation on a long agenda for this whirlwind 24-hour trip the president is embarking on with the First Lady here in Canada. Normally, presidents of both parties had come to Canada as their very first foreign trip. This had taken longer due to COVID, but if we all remember and look back on this relationship, President Biden's first phone call to any foreign leader in office was to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Hallie. So that underscores this important relationship, but not without its complicated issues as well.
Monica Alba live for us in Ottawa as the president and first lady, as you're seeing live, are on the ground there. More from Monica and the team at the White House, covering the White House tomorrow. A Colorado dentist is in court today, accused of murdering his wife by poisoning her protein shake with cyanide and arsenic, and we're finding out he may have tried to drug her before. It is a stunning case that is capturing a lot of people's attention because of the details here. This is Dr. James Craig facing those formal first-degree murder charges today. And the police affidavit lays out a timeline for how this went down. It says arsenic was delivered to his home on March 4th. 2 days later, the documents say, his wife Angela went into the hospital. That same day, according to the docs, she texts her husband saying she felt drugged. Now, listen to how he replied. He says, I'm quoting, "Given our history, I know that must be triggering. Just for the record, I didn't drug you." And if you're like, well, wait, why would he say that might be triggering? Well, in the affidavit, Angela's sister says Angela told her she'd been drugged by him a few years ago. At that time, he said he was going to commit suicide and didn't want her to be able to stop him. Jump ahead a week, and the documents show now that James Craig gets potassium cyanide delivered to his dental practice on March 13th. He'd apparently been doing online searches for this stuff on his work computer. Angela Craig was hospitalized again on March 14th and died 5 days later. Miguel Almaguer is joining us now. And Miguel, some of the stuff seems almost unbelievable as far as the details coming out of this police affidavit.
Yeah, Hallie, that arrest affidavit is 52 pages long, and the police clearly lay out their case against Dr. James Craig. It includes his alleged internet searches prior to ordering arsenic and potassium cyanide online, which he's accused of. Police say online he searched how many grams of pure arsenic will kill a human, is arsenic detectable in autopsy, and top 5 undetectable poisons that show no signs of foul play. Investigators also laid out a motive, saying the dentist wanted to start a new life with his lover, an orthodontist from Texas who actually flew to Colorado while his wife was dying. Legal experts say it could all be damning evidence. We did reach out to Craig's attorney, but we have not yet received a comment back, Hallie.
But that's the question, just as a lay person looking at this, right, Miguel? And it truly does feel like something that might be straight out of Dateline here. Like, no, what are we're hearing nothing from James Craig's attorneys, right? I mean, you said he didn't file a plea, nothing on that instance. I just am wondering, like, what is he going to say here?
Yeah, we have not yet heard. There's no apparent defense. This was the first hearing. The doctor didn't enter a plea. He'll be back in court in April. The appearance today was fairly short, only about 10 minutes. We did learn that James Craig's parents and some of his 6 children were actually present during the hearing. He didn't seem to address them or even look in their direction. It's just a sordid affair here that will likely get even messier as we head towards a possible trial. But as you mentioned, Hallie, all eyes on what will his defense be.
That is exactly right. Miguel Almaguer live for us out west. Miguel, thank you. Good to see you tonight. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the Utah governor has signed a couple of laws today requiring social media companies get parental consent for any kids on their sites or apps. These companies also have to verify the age of anybody in Utah who makes a profile. Utah now becomes the first state to go this far. A few other states are considering rules like these. The regulations come after debates, of course, of the impact of social media on the mental health of kids. Number 2, Hyundai and Kia recalling basically more than 500,000 cars because of an issue that could cause parts of them to catch fire. There's apparently a flaw in the harness used to tow things that can short circuit in the rain and burst into flames. Owners are being told park inside until you can get it fixed. Number 3, the Chicago Blackhawks are not going to wear special warm-up jerseys to celebrate Pride Night on Sunday. The NHL is worried that wearing the jerseys could put some of their Russian players in danger when they go home because of anti-gay laws back in Russia. The Blackhawks coach is calling this an unfortunate situation at the moment. Number 4, attempted book bans or restrictions at schools and public libraries set a record last year, according to a report from the American Library Association. It says there were more than 1,200 challenges, nearly double the number from 2021. Number 5, a new study suggests that strains of E. coli from meat may be causing more than 500,000 UTIs every year, urinary tract infections. Researchers at George Washington University have spent a decade analyzing UTIs. They say most of the infections are caused by E. coli and maybe about 8% triggered by improperly prepared meat. They're pretty common, UTIs, but they can be dangerous if the infection gets into the kidneys or the bloodstream. It's more health news now because Skittles could end up banned in California, along with other candy like Nerds, if a new proposal ends up the law in that state. It is a long shot, folks. It is a super duper long shot, to the point where even one of the 2 lawmakers pushing this plan acknowledges it's like 0% that Skittles is actually going to get banned. So if you're like, okay, well, then why is he doing it? He's doing it to shine a spotlight, he says, on the chemicals in this kind of candy that have been linked to more of a risk of cancer and other serious health problems. We're talking about 5 specific chemicals in cereal and bread and soda, even some processed cheese, that help make the food last longer, taste better, and look better. The lawmaker leading this charge hopes that even by shining this light on it, it could force manufacturers to find some other ingredients, less harmful ingredients, to make their products. Dr. John Torres is joining us now. Talk us through this. How real is the risk from chemicals in your Skittles? I know, and I will just blow up your spot here. They are a beloved candy for you. You have a particular affinity for them. Give us some context here.
And Hallie, just first and foremost, I do love Skittles, but I try to moderate what I eat there because, you know, it's candy, so I don't want to eat too much of it. But when you look at the health risks, there are associations with these health risks. And by associations, I mean there's nothing directly saying, yes, this causes that, but it's that type of study where you look at and you say, okay, there's some associations. In animal studies, it looks like it could be happening. In human studies, we still don't have a definitive answer. But what this is highlighting is kind of difference between our FDA and our USDA, which regulate our food and regulate what goes into our food, versus the European equivalents of that, the European food associations, where they do it differently. Over there, they try to do things proactively, meaning they say, if there's even a slightest possibility this could be happening, we want to go ahead and ban it, and then we'll do the studies to find out if it's safe. Here, if it looks like it's safe, we go ahead and push it through, and then if we find out it's unsafe later, we go ahead and withdraw it. So you can see the differences there. But right now, again, the associations are there, but no direct causal link is there, and I think that's one of the big messages.
But here's the thing, Dr. John, these 5 specific chemicals are already banned in the EU. Why are we still using them here?
And that's part, again, the way these 2 different entities work and how they do things. When you look at the risks behind these things, you know, the risks they're talking about is kind of a string of lists that are going on. You know, first and foremost, they could be behavioral issues that happen with children and that's probably one of the biggest links we can see out there. Increased risk of cancers in some people, harm to the reproductive system, and damage to the immune system. But what we're also finding out is some people tend to be more sensitive to these issues and could have more issues with them than other people. And so that's part of the confusion here, Hallie.
We just showed part of a letter that was sent from some food industry groups pushing back on this proposal. Again, just a proposal, it's just a bill, it's not law, saying that all 5 of these additives have been thoroughly reviewed by the federal and state systems and many international scientific bodies and continue to be deemed safe. From a doctor's perspective, you know, you look at this, I look at it from a political perspective, and I think, man, these food industry groups, they're a big lobby, right? I mean, is there at least some sense that this is shining a spotlight the way that lawmaker intended this bill to do?
And I think it is shining a spotlight on this issue here, and I think that's a spotlight that does need to be shined because we do need to make sure that things that go into our body are safe. At the same time, when you look at the studies that have been done, we don't have definitive answers. And so this goes back to the question of, until we have definitive answers, should we ban it or should we say, okay, at this point it looks like it could be safe, so let's go ahead and push it forward. But I think the bottom line is we are seeing in some of these studies that in high consumption rates, so the more you eat, the more the risk is there. The answer is simply, you know, cut back on those. You know, I'm certainly going to cut back on Skittles now after listening to this, but I'm not going to give them up. I'll be honest with you. Right. I love Skittles. No. So, you know, again, it's one of those things that the more you eat, the more issues you might have with it. So moderation comes into play here, like anything else. And be a label reader. Look at your label, see what's in there. Okay. If it's some of these chemicals, then you don't want to eat them, then don't eat them.
Dr. John Torres, that is some solid advice. Thank you. Coming up, we've got an exclusive look inside NATO warships and one secret mission, why officials think Russia is behind some mysterious drones flying over Norway. Plus, imagine leaving the store and running into a zebra. Okay, well, that is what happened in South Korea. We'll tell you why in the Global. We have got a rare and exclusive look behind the scenes as NATO ramps up its patrols to defend important oil and gas fields from the Russian Navy. You see it here. Look at this. Look at what's on your screen. That is apparently a Russian nuclear submarine's periscope in video captured by the Norwegian Air Force, basically. It's peeking up right over Norway's pipelines in the North Sea. It's all happening right near where our own Tom Costello spent 3 days on NATO patrol through these really sensitive areas between Norway and Scotland. Watch.
These are very vulnerable gas fields and oil fields out off the coast of Norway. Are there submarines, Russian subs, right now practicing their efforts down below, watching over those pipelines. NATO has sensors on the ocean floor listening for Russian activity. But this ship's job is to go out and look for any ship activity that could be in any way threatening the oil and gas platforms.
Tom Costello is back home from that trip. He is back here in Washington joining us now. We're glad to have you here, Tom. And what's interesting here is what I think you've described as like a noticeable level of urgency here, given more activity from Russian subs like the one that we just saw in that video.
Well, as you could see, the waters are very rough and the tension is high there on the North Sea. And we were on this Norwegian Coast Guard naval ship, and they are looking for Russian subs and Russian ships. And it's because of the video that we showed you there of that Russian sub moving through these waters that have the critical oil and gas infrastructure, and then underneath the water surface, down on the floor of the sea, the internet lines to connect the U.S. and the and Europe. So I talked to the chief admiral in charge of Norway's Navy, who talked to me about the Russian threat right over their border and the arsenal, the nuclear arsenal that's there. Listen to what he had to say.
This is Murmansk, and it is perhaps the world's largest concentration of nuclear weapons.
Right there, near Murmansk?
Yes.
And it's right across your border?
It is, and it's part of the strategic deterrence between great powers that has been in place after World War II and beyond.
Admiral Rune Anderson there telling me, listen, they have been in a standoff of sorts with Russia for decades. Yeah. What's different now? What's different now, he says, is that Russian sub-activity is more unpredictable. It's more aggressive, in his words, and they're concerned, especially given all of the activity, the Russian activity in these critical waters that are critical to NATO, to the European Union, and to Norway.
It was incredible to hear how, while you were out there with NATO, the Secretary General shows up with the head of the EU to kind of deliver the show of force to Russia, to say this is economically important. Can you pull back, we love a good pull back the curtain here? Right. Open up like the reporter's notebook or your reporter's laptop. What was like behind the scenes? Like, what was it like being on the ship?
Well, first of all, the water was rough, and I'll just
don't even talk about seasickness,
3 of the 4 crew members that I was with, 3 of the 4 of us got very sick, very sick. Anyway, we cleared this all the way to this went to the very top of NATO.
It would have to, I would think,
for us to be on the ship.
Yeah,
absolutely. But they said to us, can we move your trip up by a week? And we thought, okay, whatever,
you said
sure.
Yes, obviously.
Well, then we found out why. We're out there on the water, and suddenly they said to us, we're getting pulled into a NATO operation, and you're coming with us. Can't get off the ship. Wow, okay, fine. Yeah. Suddenly off to both sides of the ship, there's a Dutch warship and a Spanish warship and a German warship surrounding that mega platform, 1,500-foot platform out there in the North Sea, which in and of itself is an engineering marvel. And then here comes a helicopter over the top, landing on that platform, and off steps the NATO Secretary General and the President of Europe. And they stand up there on the top of that platform and make a declaration. We will protect these territories, these gas lines, these internet lines, because it's critical infrastructure. So it was really a statement of planting a flag surrounded by NATO warships.
Well, we look forward to seeing more of it tomorrow morning on the Today Show, Tom. I know you've got a behind-the-scenes look at being on some of those fast boats, right, out in those waters. We're excited to see it. Congratulations to you and your producer, Joel Seidman, for such great reporting.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
NBC News covers hundreds of other international stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our foreign desk has done it for you. Here is some of what they're keeping an eye on in a new segment we call The Global. In Israel, the country's parliament passed a law today that basically limits the ways that a sitting prime minister could be considered unfit for office. Critics say it's just a way to protect Benjamin Netanyahu, the current prime minister, who's facing a corruption trial. The new law is part of Netanyahu's controversial judicial overhaul plan, the one that hundreds of thousands of Israelis have been protesting for the last several months. The plan has led the nation to one of its worst domestic crises. In Bulgaria, police have found an unknown Jackson Pollock painting during a raid when they were investigating international art smugglers. The Bulgarian National Radio reports experts think this this painting, this new Pollock, basically, could be worth more than $50 million. We're showing you some file video because we don't actually know what the new painting looks like or any other details. He's, of course, that super famous abstract painter from the 40s and 50s. And take a look at what happened in South Korea. Check this out. Imagine looking out in your window and seeing a zebra casually walking by. That is what happened in Seoul after a zebra escaped the zoo. It's just out walking around, hanging out. It eventually got caught and sent back. What a world, folks. Still to come here on the show. Your favorite TV show could soon be written with a little help from AI. More on that next. Right now, the next big artificial intelligence fight seems to be playing out in the TV and film industry. A big labor union is trying to make sure a writer cannot be replaced with AI. In a tweet, the Writers Guild of America says AI-generated text cannot be considered in determining writing credit, which matters for how much they're paid. It also points out that AI only spits out what it's fed, making the point that plagiarism is a feature of the AI process. At the same time, it's saying in some instances, writers can use AI to help them, like how the rest of us would use research material. All of it came up while the Writers Guild is negotiating a new contract with the alliance that reps some big studios and networks, including our parent company, NBC Universal. That alliance did not respond to our request for comment. Jake Ward is joining us now. What's so interesting here, Jake, is it possible? I mean, as we talk about the way that AI is becoming more and more of a force in all of our lives, could the next Oscar-winning screenplay come from a chatbot? Is that where we're going here?
I mean, that is certainly the worry that the Writers Guild of America and so many other creative industries are worried about here, Hallie. I mean, right, you're talking about creative job after creative job that we have seen just in the last few months since ChatGPT made its debut. You know, suddenly everybody's realizing, oh, wow, I write for a living. Oh, wow, I come up with language and ideas for a living. Oh, geez, this thing does a very, very good impersonation of human creativity. And that's why the Writers Guild of America seems to be trying to come up with these new guidelines. They're pretty interesting. You know, on the one hand, they say that you can use ChatGPT to basically create, do the research for you. You can use it for research material, but you cannot use it as source material. You cannot use it to feed somebody else's screenplay in and out pops an original looking thing. And you can't adapt AI-generated material. All of this is pretty interesting. You know, and the good news for most creative industries is at the moment, the courts do not seem predisposed to give AI writing credit or credit for anything. There's a guy named Dr. Stephen Thaler, who's been trying for years in court to prove that his AI-generated piece of art should get its own copyright credit. The courts keep shooting him down. That's been the sort of litmus test for most of these things. So right now, it doesn't seem like AI is poised to actually take the credit away from screenwriters, which, as you know, is what they hate the most. But it is certainly poised to be part of their job, as it is so many jobs.
What we think about, too, I think, when we look at, the AI revolution, right, and as you point out, poised to take over a lot of different jobs, the Indeed.com, the job site, there was some analysis that it saw a 140% increase in, AI references. But what's also interesting is last year they looked at NFT-related listings. Those are down in the last year, right? In other words, is this, like NFTs, kind of a flash in the pan, or do you think that AI stuff is here to stay when it comes to the way that we're integrating it with the work that we do?
I think this is a fundamental shift to how human society is about to work, for better or for worse. And it has to do, of course, with the ability of these systems to impersonate human creativity and human expertise. Now, again, it's just a parrot. It's not a genius, but it can stand in for all kinds of things. And that's why you've seen ChatGPT and the rest, not only trying to replace the work of writers and so forth, but they're trying to make it so that you and I can simply create software without knowing how to write code. These sorts of knowledge work jobs are beginning to see AI move into them in a way that, only blue-collar jobs had been touched even a couple of years before, Hallie.
Jake Ward, it is fascinating. Thank you for being the tip of the spear for us. We'll have more for you here tomorrow because that wraps us up for tonight. A non-AI written newscast, let me just say. Top Story starts now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.